So we can read the statement. A number is ternary if it consists of only 0, 1 and 2, just like binary has 0 and 1. And similarly, they have defined a XOR as a plus b modulo 3. And you can see that it is compatible with the XOR we know in the binary also, that if you take XOR, definition for XOR for binary as a plus b modulo 2, it will also work. And then we have given an example. Now, now for the XOR part, we can start writing the cases. Like if we want to get 0, if we are given the digit as target as 0, then we can either get it as 0 plus 0 or 1 plus 2. If we have to get 1, we can write it as 0 plus 1 and 2 plus 2, as the modulo 3 will get 1. And similarly for 2, we can write this way. And here we are guaranteed that the first digit of x is 2. So the first digit is this case. And also we are said that we cannot have any leading zeros. So by guarantee, we can say that the first digit will always follow this case, 1 plus 1. So both A and B are going to be 1 in the starting. And after that, we can consider these cases. In the case for 0, there is no point of ever writing 1 plus 2 because this will always give us a bigger number. So we always take 0. Similarly, in this case, we'll also take this case always. But in this one, we have an interesting thing. If we do 0 plus 2, that gives us 3a and 3b plus 2. If we do 1 plus 1, it gives 3a plus 1 and 3b plus 1. But if we write it like this, then the max will be the 3a, max will be 3a plus 1 if a and b are equal. So if a and b are equal, we will want to take this case. So this will be no. If they are equal, it will be this one, b plus 2. So this will always give a bigger number. So we'll always try to take this case, and you can see here in the code. Yeah. So first we have to take a case when the both numbers are equal or not, and then when they both are equal as they are 1, we are taking the 0 as 0. And if we get 1, that is the point we are breaking the symmetry, that we are assigning 1 to be a to be a bigger number and b to be a smaller number. And otherwise, we are going to take this case. And once we have that a is greater than b, then we can follow the other case. And for this property, you can prove by seeing this, that if a is greater than b, then 3a plus 0 is always going to be greater than 3b plus 2, because these are integers. So I hope this problem is clear. Just now we are going to discuss this question. The problem statement is short. In an array, we have to take the elements such that the first element, the earlier element, and the 2 into the next element have GCD greater than 1. That means they are not co-prime basically. And we have to find the maximum number of good index pairs. So we have to first look over this condition and make out cases and what can be the cases in this. So if both AI and AJ are odd, then we will have then multiplying it by 2 won't make a difference. We'll still get the same GCD of odd 1 and odd 2. If both of them are even, then we are also going to get 2 as the common divisor, so that does not make a difference. So even whatever the GCD may be, it will be greater than 1, or at least we can say greater than equal to 2. The case becomes interesting when we have one of the problems, one of the AI, when we have one of the numbers as odd and another is even. Now, if we keep the first number odd and the second number even, then this is not going to have the 2 as common, because this is odd and this 2 into even will again become an even. But if you multiply the odd number by 2, then we have both of the numbers as even, and whatever the GCD may be, it will have 2 common. So after this, what we want is that AI should be In such a case, AI should be odd and AJ should be even. No, sorry. Yeah. AI should be even and AJ should be odd. So for the greedy and the optimal case, we are going to shift first all the even numbers to the front and keep all the odd numbers at the back. So that whenever the combination between odd and even happens, it is always that the even number is AI and the odd number is AJ. So you can see from this code. Yeah, I had created a separate vector for odd numbers and then kept it temporarily in that odd vector and then combined them using insert. But you can also do it like just keep just run the for loop two times. First insert the even numbers and then insert the odd numbers. And after that we are just normally checking this condition if this is true and then we are giving out the count.
I think we can also use a DQ and insert push front, push back for even and odd.
Yeah. So if there are no doubts, let me move to problem G. The problem was zero remainder array. So basically first have an integer x. During each move, one thing is fixed that x is always going to increase by 1 in each move, and we have the choice to maybe increase one number of that array by that number. And also we are given this condition. So we have number going from n to let our answer be moves, and we can actually this is going from 0. Yeah, and we can add this number to this x to a number to make it divisible. So for each x, we are going to say if adding this number to that number is going to make it divisible by x, then we add it. And also this condition is interesting here because if this was not given, then maybe if we had like, let's say we could have added it twice. Like if we had one, then we could have either added 5 to it, or maybe one we could have first added 2 and then 3 to make it divisible by 6. So let us go through this example. This is a very nice test case as the values are distinct. So yeah, first let's go take a number from 0 to moves. The 0 won't make a difference. So when k is 1, let us select this example, this 5, and then we are going to add 5 plus 1. When k is 2, we want the number that when we add 2 to it, the result becomes divisible by 6. So we are going to look for a number which has the number modulo 6 equal to 4. So we have here 10. So now if we add 2 to it, let me actually do it here. Now this is done. Now this is actually now 6. Now we are going to add 2 to it. So it becomes divisible by 6 again. And when we have k equal to 3, we are going to add the number which has modulo 3 here. So it becomes 6 here. When k is equal to 4, we are going to look for a number which has the modulo as 2. So when we add 4, it becomes divisible by 6. So let's take this and make it 12. And again, on 5, we do it similarly. Let's take it and make it plus 5. And on 6, adding 6 to a number won't make a difference if it is divisible by 6 or not. And again, on 7, we would have wanted a number that should have modulo as 5, but none of these numbers have modulo 5, so we skip it. Same for 8, and then we can keep continuing like this. Like when k is 9, we take this number and add 9 to it. Then we have 10, then we can take this and add 10 to it. Now we have 11, then we take this and add to it. On 13 changes. On 13 we skip it, on 14 and 15 we skip. Then on 16 we are we add 16 here. No, this one, yeah, yeah. Basically, that was it. So as you can observe now, if we rather than seeing it vertically, if you try to see it horizontally, these are the numbers which have modulo 2 in one line, These are the numbers which have modulo 1 in that line and similarly. And the answer we get does not depend on all these numbers. It depends on the number which has the maximum value of this cycle. As you can see, this is like a 3 cycle. So let us go to the code. Yeah. So basically we make a map, and here it is important to use a map because the value of k goes from 0 to 10 raised to 9. So it cannot be done in an array. So this stores the modulo of that number, and this stores the number of numbers which have that modulo. So if it is 0, then we don't want to deal with that case because we had to do nothing in that. If it is a finite modulo, then we keep counting it. Yeah. And then and now we have to find the number which has the maximum value of this. So we going to iterate through the map. If the value of that is greater than the mod, we are going to make it the value. And in just in case that both of these number are equal, like here you can see that this case and this case have the equal this thing like this, both are on the third column here, or maybe say let's the third cycle. Then we are going to compare that, we take the larger one. So here we have got the max. So here the mods max contains the number of cycles we needed to get to that number, so that is 3. And then we are going to do minus max because we are have to see the complement. Like if it was this 2, then we would have 4. So 6 minus is this. And now we are going to add 1 because we started from 0, so we have to count that one also. So I hope you can understand this one now.
In this question, we are given an array of n integers, and we have to find the number of pairs for which the sum is greater than L, greater than equal to L, and less than equal to R. For example, if the array is 5 and 2, we have to find the L is 4 and R is 7. So there's only two pairs possible for 5 1 is greater than 4 less than 7, for 1 and 5 2 greater than 4 less than 7. So we can easily break this problem into two sub problems to find number of pairs which is less than equal to R and the number of pairs which is less than L. And if we subtract both of them, we'll get the required answer. For example, in this array 2 5 2 1 1, we can just sort it because it will be easier to implement like this. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So 1. So here 1. Again 1 plus 2 is 3, which is less than 5. Then again 1. 1 plus 2 again. 1 plus 5 is not less than 5. So we'll not add, then we'll go to this one. Again 1 plus 2, 1 plus 2, 2. Uh, then we'll go there 2 plus 2, 1, and 2 plus 5 is not less than 5. So in total we have 6 such pairs. For r is equal to 13, we can go from 1 for this one, we can pair this 1 2 2 5 for this, again 2 2 5 for this, 2 2 5 for this 5. So total will be 10. And if we just subtract 10 minus 6, you'll get the answer 4, and you can see only 4 such pair exist, one, this one, and this 5. Sum is 6, which is greater than 5 less than 13. Then this one, this 5, then this 2 and 5, and 2 and 5. And to get for suppose if we take this and we have to find till where in the array we are getting the that the sum is less than r, less than r is equal to less than or equal to r. So you can just use binary search for this to find r minus the position till where the element is less than r minus ai. You can use binary search for both, it will be log n implementation, or you can use vectors and use the STL functions uh, the upper bound and the lower bound. So you just take the input and sort the array, and this upper bound basically what it does that suppose if you have an array such as 10, 20, 30, 30, 40, and you search for in the upper bound you search for an element 30, so it will return the pointer to here at the position 4. It will just give the position till where the number is less than last number, which is less than or equal to the search number. And in the lower bound it gives strictly less than. Suppose in this array if we search 30, it will give us till here strictly less than. In upper bound it's give less than and equal to. So for just for r minus ai, you search and you add those number of pairs, and then you again for till l, you have to find till l minus 1. So you either you can use upper bound and l minus 1, or you can use just lower bound until you, it will give the iterator till there, and this just minus a dot begin because it's iterator, so this will give the number of values, that is a position 4 or 3 or something. And this is just suppose you take suppose yeah, like this, if you just go from a 1 and you want to find something 1 minus third for 5 volt 1 5 minus 1 4, so it will give till here. So in this one is also included, but you have already taken it as the first element. So if that is the case, that is the same element is less is greater than L and less than R, then you just remove that. And in this case, you are counting every pair two times. First, you are counting 1 5, then you are counting 5 1. So just divide this by 2. I hope it's clear. If there's any doubt, you can ask. In this question, on day 1, we are given a bacteria with mass M, and every day we can split into some of the beans into two. Like if there are three beans, either we can decide not to split any of the beans, or one bean or two bean or all the three beans. And every night each bacteria will the mass increases by one for the each bacteria. So we have to print the number of the minimum number of nights needed, and how many bacteria will split on the ith day. So suppose in the first day we are given with 1, so if we don't uh, split the bacteria, then after night 1 we'll get bacteria with mass 2. And suppose we split the bacteria, then we'll have two bacteria with zero point 0.5 masses, and after night 1 we'll get 1.5, that is total equal to 3. Then again on night 2, suppose we go from here 2 and do not split it, then night 3 will be 3. If you split it, then 2 to 4. Suppose if we split only this 1.5 or not this, so 0.75, 0.75, then it will increase to 1.75, 1.75, and this will just increase to 2.5, uh, which will be equal to 3.6 plus 6. If we don't divide both of these, then both will be 2.5, which will give 5. So after, and if we split all, then we'll get 7. So you see at max on day 1 we have 1, on at after night 1 at max we can get 3, and after night 2 at max we can give 7. Similarly, you'll go on further and you'll notice that every day you can after every night you can increase the mass from 0 to 2 to the power, that is the night, the ith night is second night, so I to the power 4. Here 2 0 to 2 to the power 1. So either you can get 1 2, sorry 2 or 3. Here you can get 4 5 6 7. So, and what's the best approach or the greedy approach that you'll have to suppose you want 7. So each day you will try to maximize the mass. First day you have 1, then you will split it and then get 3, then you split all, then again get 7. But once you have this, then you cannot split all, otherwise you'll get the answer as 15. So you have to see how much you can split. In the example, it's in the given 11. It's given that for day 1 we'll split 1, for day 2 we'll split again 1, and for day 3 we'll split again 2. So one approach can be that you just in a vector you just start storing 2 to the power 0, then 2 to the power 1, again and again. That is the maximum number you can get, increase you can get. And at the suppose after kth night you get something 2 to the power k, 2 to the power I from 0 to k. And suppose your sum total, that is the number you want, is this plus something, an arbitrary number a. But if we just add another night 1 I plus k, this total sum plus 2 to the power k plus 1, it will exceed the n that you want. So you have to just add a. So in the vector you will just push back this extra value a, and you can sort the array again, and then you'll have something like 1 2 4. Suppose that a is 4, so again 4, then you'll add again, which will be 8, something like this. uh, so in this day from night 3 you don't split any of the beans, so you just increase only 4. The way to implement this is that till the sum the sum in which we'll just add I into I plus 2, I is taken at 1, will push back 1, then into 2 per I every time, and this is the total sum till it is less than n. Suppose if the last ith value minus some I is not is equal to n, so we'll just push back that and then sort. And also that every time the increment in the change in the increase of the mass is equal to the number of splits. Like here the previous increase was 2 and you get 3, and again if you want 5 you will not split any, then you will get 5. That is the change in this will be 2 from 3 to 5 2. So change 2 and change 2, the difference is 0, so you have not split any beans. If you split only one bean to get 6, that is 0. 1.75 1.75, and then this another bean 2.5. So earlier you had a change of 2, now you will have a change of 1 plus 2 and plus 2 3. So 3 minus 2 is equal to 1, that is you have split 1 beans. So for the number of nights needed, you can just print the size of the vector minus 1, cause initially you start with 1. uh, you can, I mean, it's understandable. And so you can just, after sorting it, you can just print the difference between the consecutive elements of the vector, as in the vector you have stored the changes every night, change in the mass every night. So that's pretty much the answer.
So it says that we have been given array, and we can add elements to it between 1 to n, and there is no limit with the number of elements you can add and the location. And at the end, the final array, all the subarrays of length k should have same sum. Now let's make some observations. So firstly, suppose we take k is equal to 5. So the length 5 subarray, suppose the sum will be a plus b plus c plus d plus e. And if you take the the next subarray, so the next element has to be a to maintain the same sum. And in same way, if you proceed, the next element has to be b. So at the end, we are basically getting a periodic array. Final array must have first k elements repeated throughout the array. Okay, so we can say that the length of the array at the end will be divisible by k. So it will be a multiple of k. So one observation we can make is, if the number of distinct elements is greater than k, it is impossible to build a beautiful array, because if you can see, the first 6 elements has to be repeated, and if you already have greater than k distinct elements, then it's impossible to build such an array, because you can't delete elements, you can only add new ones. Um, Now we'll take an example to understand the strategy of building the final array. So let's take this array with n is equal to 8 and k is equal to 4. So if you look, the number of distinct elements here is 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and that is same as the value of k in this case. So the step 1 will be put all the distinct elements in the front of the final array, and here in this case, because k is equal to 4, so that builds up the first k elements, and it doesn't matter in which order you put it. Here I put it in ascending order 1 2 3 4. So the next step will be repeat the first k elements n times. Now this is what it looks like. The red, so yellow and green I have used to distinguish between the set of k elements that has been repeated throughout the array, and the red elements 4 2 1 4 1 3 3 2, those are the array elements which were initially present in the input, and the black elements are those that have been added. So here you can see that this strategy will work for uh, arrays which have exactly k distinct elements. Now what if k is more than the number of distinct elements given? So in that case, you can just add extra, 1 second. Here you can see extra ones you can add at the end, and you can just repeat it, extra ones enough to reach k elements in the beginning, and you can just repeat it n times, and you'll get a n into k length final array. So let me show you the code once, the implementation. So here you can see I have taken the input of nk, and I have created a set of integers. So here I'm taking the input, and since we know that only distinct elements matter, we only need to know the number of distinct elements and what are they to build the final array. So I'm taking the input and inserting it into the array in the set, so it will keep it in ascending order, and will the numbers won't be repeated in a set, as we know. So, and here if nice dot size is greater than k, which means the number of distinct elements is greater than k, I am printing -1, which means it is impossible to build the final array which such details as given. The qualities of being a beautiful array cannot be satisfied. So here I am giving the output n into k, which is the size of the final array which we have planned earlier, and I have created a vector where I am pushing the distinct elements in, and then till the size is k equal to k, I am pushing once, as we saw earlier. If the number of distinct elements is less than k, then once will be pushed in the end, and then I am printing that this vector n times to get the final array, and that's the answer.
Hello, I'll be discussing this problem H price fixed. Lena wants to buy some food items for a trip from a store named Price Fix. So this is the description of store. There are infinite number of items of every product, and all product has the same price, 2 rubles per item. And moreover, for every product type, we get a 50% discount if the total number of items purchased by Lena is PI. So she needs to buy n products and at least AI items of the ith product. Our input is given in this form. N is number of products, then n lines are given, and the two integers ai and bi denote the required number of the ith product and how many products you need to buy to get the discount on the ith product. So suppose I have some original list which looks like this, and firstly I will sort the list in non-decreasing order of B. So our list becomes this, and P1 and P2 are 2 pointers. So in my greedy strategy, I'll be buying items from the beginning and from the end also. So P1 denotes the current element from the beginning and P2 denotes the current element from the end. And N equals to total number of items which are already purchased. So this is the greedy strategy that I follow. Firstly, if there is any item that already has discounted price, that means Vi for that item is less than or equal to N. So just buy it first because its price is not gonna reduce further. So, but after buying that item, we might get discount on some other item. So it is always optimal to buy those items first which are currently offering us discount. If there are no such items, then start buying items from the end of list, which has maximum B. We do this because for reaching the maximum number of B, we will have to buy a lot of items from the beginning at the price of 2. But if we start buying from the end, then we might get some items from the beginning at price 1. So it's always optimal to buy those items first which have max B, and I'll be explaining more through the implementation. This is the code for this problem. Here I take the input A and B, and this is the vector of pairs where I'm taking BA instead of AB because I want to sort in order of B. And the 2 pointers P1 and P2. P1 points to the beginning of current list and P2 points to the end of current list. Cost is the total cost till our when we reach the current step, and count is the items which we have already purchased, total number of items. So while P1 is less than or equal to P2, so we first check if our count is less than B for the item number P1, then we need to buy this much items to get discount on that item. That is, this term is actually B for P1 minus the count of items which we have already purchased. So we'll purchase this much items from the end of list which has maximum B, and if the end term is not having sufficient items, that is items is less than this, so we buy all the items from the last. And here, although the question allows us to buy more items than needed, but it is never optimal to buy more than what we need. So we have this bound on the current number of items which we need to purchase. And here temp is the number of items which we are purchasing in current step. So this VP2 dot second is actually A for P2. It gets reduced by this temp. Then we update the count of current number of items, and the cost was 2 rubles per item, so we add it to the cost. And if the number of items of P2 which we need to buy becomes 0, so we decrease the pointer. That is, from the end we shift our pointer upwards. and after that, now we have now we are sure that we will get discount on the P1th item if P1 is definite is less than P2. So while the count is greater than B for P1 and P1 is less than equal to P2, we buy the items from the beginning of list. This is A for P1. We buy this much items of P1. Since these items were discounted, we get these at a cost of 1 ruble per item. So we update the cost, and after that we shift our pointer P1. So we repeat these steps unless P1 till P1 is less than equal to P2. When P1 becomes greater than P2, then we know that we have purchased all the required items and we just print the cost.
Okay, now I'll be going with problem I. So here we have been basically we have been given an array, and an kth compression array is basically subarrays of length k are considered and their minimum is taken, and we form an array using that. So and we have to list all k's that give the final array after taking the minimums. It forms a permutation, and a permutation is basically like if the number of elements in that array is n, so you have all numbers 1 till n in that array in any order. So okay, so here we have an example. So suppose we have to take the fourth compression array. So we take all subarrays of length 4 and take their minimum. So here we get 3, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2 and 1. So this forms a permutation here. So this is a valid compression because we have all 7 elements here. And now first observation will be that if for suppose for the kth compression array is invalid, and a compression will be invalid when a number is repeated, obviously. So if and that can happen. So if the kth compression has a repeated element, then it's confirmed that any I less than k till 2 will have the ith compression will also be invalid, because as you go finer and take lesser elements in the subarrays, it's obvious they're going to repeat the element which was repeated in the earlier higher ones. So so we have two special cases for k is equal to 1 and k is equal to n. So k is equal to 1 is basically length of subarray of length 1, so is each element. So for the one first compression array will be valid if the entire array is already a permutation. Okay, so it should have all elements 1 to n, and the nth compression array for k is equal to n will take the entire array as the kth n element subarray will be the entire array. So the minimum of the entire array will be has to be 1, so that the final array what you get will be of length 1, so it should have the number 1 in the array. So the minimum of the entire array should be 1 to get, for the nth compression array to be valid. Now for the regular one, suppose we have an array of length 8, a1 a2 a3 a4 a5 a7 a8, and we take the n minus 1th compression array, which is here 7. So length of subarrays of length 7 will you'll get two subarrays. So it can be valid only if the final compression array is 1 comma 2 in any order, either 2 comma 1 or 1 comma 2. So we can make an observation that this is possible only because 1 is the minimum element in the entire array. So it's understandable that either one or either a1 or a8 should be 1, and none of them none of a2 to a7 can be number 1, or else 1 will be repeated in both elements of the n minus 1 compression array. And so here we can make a check that if count of 1 is 1, basically then count of 1 is we make an array count to store the count of all numbers in the array, because we know that the we have been given in the input that the array elements will be in the range 1 to n. So we can just create a array of length n and store the count of each element. So count of 1 is equal to 1, and a1 is equal to 1, or a8 is equal to 1, and count of 2 is not equal to 0. So basically, if suppose a1 is 1, then 2 should be present in this the remaining array, then only you will get, because 1 is here, so the minimum of the rest of the array should be 2 to get the n minus 1 compression as 1 comma 2 or 2 comma 1. So suppose a1 is equal to 1 without loss of generality. So here we'll take the n minus 2 compression now, because now since the n minus 1 compression is valid, we considered. So, and we took a1 is equal to 1, so the remaining array will be of length 7, and the n minus 2 compression will be length 6. So again you will get two subarrays here, because here if you go consider a1, the first subarray will you will anyways get the minimum as 1. So we already have one, so n minus 2 compression array will be valid only when you have the final arrays 1 comma 2 comma 3. So here if you take this a1 a2 a3 a4 a5 a6, this will give 1. So here you, in the remaining elements you have to get 2 and 3. So here again the same way you can consider that a2 or a8 can only be equal to 2, and if remaining of the numbers have 2, then it will be repeated, and the count of 3 should not be equal to 0 in the remaining array. Suppose a2 is equal to 3, then 3 should be present in this array. So, or if a8 is equal to 2, then 3 should be remaining in between a2 to a7. So this, so basically you can take two pointers L and R and keep considering the same way as the first element and the last element in the remaining array, and till it becomes invalid, because we know that if the kth compression invalid, so the remaining lesser case will also be invalid. So let me show you the implementation, it will get clear. So here what we are doing is we have the array an, which will be the given input, the count of each number, the number of unique numbers, and the final answer, which is basically a boolean array, uh, which will store, if kth compression is invalid, then answer of k will be 0, and if kth compression is valid, answer of k will be 1. So here we are taking the input, and the count of, if count of array is 0, we are basically counting the unique elements. You can have your own implementation for that. So if the number of unique elements is equal to n, then the first compression will be equal to 1. Basically you are having all n distinct numbers in there, so the given array is already a permutation. This is what is being checked here. So the first compression array will be valid, and if count of 1, so that this checks if the minimum, so since we know that the array elements are in the range 1 to n, so we only have to check if the number of ones in the array is greater than 0. So if that is the case, then the nth compression will be 1, and nth compression will be valid. So here we are taking the two pointers, L is equal to 0, R is equal to n minus 1. So we are taking all k's starting from n minus 1 till k is greater than 1. So k is equal to 2. So here j is equal to n minus k is the element that will we are searching for. So first will be n minus 1, that will be 1, then it will be 2 3. That's how we are going to search in the first and last elements of the remaining array. So if count of j is equal to 1, so if that element is present only once in the array, and it's either at the L or R position, which is the starting and ending position of the remaining array, and count of j plus 1, which is checking if after removing this element j, if j plus 1 is already present in the array, just like we were checking if 2 is present in the first and end, and 3 should be present in the remaining array, so that you can get 1 2 3 as the final n minus 2th compression, 6th compression array in the case I showed you in the presentation. And then here I've just taken if a of L is equal to j, then L plus plus else R minus minus, because one of them is j, we know that. So, and answer of k is equal to 1, and continue. If this condition is not satisfied, I am breaking out of the loop, because the remaining case I don't have to check, because we know that if kth compression is invalid, then the lesser ones will also be invalid. And finally I am printing the answer array. That's it.
So I'll be talking about this problem Chef and triangles. So Chef likes problems on geometry. So you have to find all possible triangles with integer sides which have the radius of the inscribed circle equal to r. So you are basically given the in radius and you have to find out the number of you have to find out all possible triangles which have integer sides and that in radius. And two triangles are said to be different if they have at least one different side length. Formally, let there be two triangles T1 and T2. ABC are the lengths of sides of T1, such that A less equal to B less equal to C. Similarly, D less equal to E less equal to F are the side lengths for triangle T2. Then T1 will be said to be different from T2 if either A not equal to D or B not equal to E or C not equal to F. The input will be a single test case, which there will only be a single test case, and the only input will be the single integer r. So you will just be given the in radius, and first you have to output the number of triangles which will have that in radius, and then you have to output all the triangles. So for that you have to order the sides of the triangle in a non-decreasing order and then output all triangles in a non-decreasing order, by which they mean that you have to order first by smallest side, then by second smallest side, and if first and second sides are equal, then by third. So for example, so r will be between 1 to 100, and so for example, if in radius was 2, then there are 5 such triangles. 5, the one with side lengths 5, 12, 13, 6, 8, 10, and so on. So you can see what they meant by ordering the triangles in a non-decreasing order. First they ordered by the smallest side, so 5 less than 6 less than 6, less equal to 6 less equal to 7 less equal to 9. Then they ordered by the second side, so if here these two triangles have the same smallest side length, so they ordered by the second side, and then they will order by the third side. Okay, so that was the problem. Now how do you go about solving this? So if you play around with the problem a little bit, you will realize that the best way to think about the problem is to first make a change of variables where you denote by x this. So this is the triangle ABC and this is the in circle, and this x is the length of the tangent from A to the in circle. Similarly, you have y and z. So this is x is equal to b plus c minus a by 2. That is semi-perimeter minus a. This is something we are all familiar from high school and JEE preparation days. So yeah, if you play around with the problem a little bit, you will realize, so you'll realize that the best way to deal with the problem is to start considering these variables, because the in radius is more directly related to these variables. If you try to relate the in radius directly to the side lengths of the triangle, so suppose you call the side length opposite to the vertex A. Then if you try to directly relate the in radius small r to ABC, then it will be much more difficult and you'll end up just using the expressions for XYZ. So why not directly use XYZ? So that is why we get the motivation to use XYZ, and we can assume that X is greater than equal to Y greater than equal to Z. So what we have is, this is a formula that we all know from JEE days or high school in general. So if you don't remember this formula, you can just use RS, where R is the in radius and S is the semi-perimeter, and equate this to Heron's formula. So if you put the Heron's formula here and then just simplify that, sorry for the handwriting, then this is what you get. So we'll be using this formula because this is a pretty simple relation between the relevant quantities. And now you basically want to find all xyz. So firstly, we need to check if xyz will always be integers. So we notice that x is b plus c minus a by 2. So it will either be an integer or it will be an integer plus 0.5. If b plus c minus a is even, then x is an integer, otherwise it is an integer plus 0.5. So note that if x is an odd integer upon 2, then z also has to be an odd integer upon 2 because they both sum up to give a whole number, an integer. So if any one of xyz is not an integer but an odd integer upon 2, then all of xyz have to be an odd integer upon 2. But then if you look at this expression, this is an integer, this will be an odd integer upon 2 because you are summing three odd integers divided by 2, and this will be an integer divided by 8. Here the denominator will be 8, but here the denominator will be 2, so this is not possible. Therefore we get that x, y, z actually have to be integers. So now we just have to find all integers x, y, z which satisfy this equation, because once you find any such x, y, z, then the triangle with side lengths x plus y, z plus y, and z plus x will exist and will satisfy, will have in radius r. So we have reduced the problem to solving this in the integers. So now what we are concerned with is how do you limit the search space. So one way of solving this is you just check all possible values of x, y, z, and then compare the value of this expression with r square. If this is equal to r square, then x, y, z will produce a valid solution, otherwise it won't. But you need to limit the search space. You cannot just search over all the integers. So you need some kind of bounding here. So how to do that bounding? There could be many ways of doing that bounding. The way I went about it was, so you just take the reciprocal of this. Like basically first I tried to bound directly in this form, but I wasn't successful. So then I tried taking the reciprocal. Like sometimes it ends up being easier to do bounding when you take the reciprocal of the equation. So that is why I did this. So then I got 1 upon r square equals the sum of these three. And since we assume that x is greater than equal to y is greater than equal to z, we can say that this is less equal to 3 upon yz because yz is the smallest. So then we get yz is less equal to 3r square. So this allows us to restrict the search space. Since the value of r is at most 100, this is at most 300. So we see that we can just check all values of yz which are such that their product is less equal to 300, such that their product is less equal to 3r square. Sorry, it won't be 300, it will be 3 into 10 power 4, but that is still small enough. So this will work. So, and note that once you have the values of y and z, then the value of x is directly given by this. So this, I just rearrange this to get that x is r square into y plus z upon yz minus r square. So you just have to go through all pairs of y and z such that z is less equal to y and the product is less equal to 3r square, and you have to check if x given by this is an integer which is greater than equal to y. If it is an integer greater than equal to y, then it will be a valid solution. So how do we code this up? So you take int r and r square. This is the square of r. So I just take an r and then I just square it. Then I'll be storing the pairs, the side lengths ABC of the triangle in a vector of tuples. This tuple vector is named answers, and I'll be storing the count, the number of valid triangles in this variable ans, which is again answer. So now I'll be iterating all valid pairs z, y comma z. So first I'll initialize z to 1 and x and y will be assigned values inside the iteration, and this numerator will basically take these values. I'll be making numerator equal to r square y plus z, and den denominator, which is another variable I'll be using, I'll be making it equal to yz minus r square. So what I do is I first I initialize z equal to 1 and then I keep incrementing. Then for each z I check all values of y, then I increment z, and I keep doing this until z square exceeds 3 times r square. So initially I said y equal to z because y is greater than equal to z. So then again I will check for this given value of y, and then I'll increment it, and I'll keep doing it as long as y into z is less equal to 3r square. So numerator will become equal to r square into y plus z, and denominator will become equal to yz minus r square. So now if the denominator is less equal to 0, then you just increment y and continue to the next iteration. However, if it is positive, then you check if the numerator is divisible by denominator and numerator by denominator, which is basically the value of x. Is it greater than equal to value? Is it greater than equal to y? If both these conditions are true, then we set x equal to numerator by denominator. We increment this counter variable. Then I make the tuple y plus z, x plus z, x plus y. So note here that the side lengths of the triangle will be y plus z, z plus x, x plus y in increasing order. Y plus z will be smallest, x plus y will be the largest. So I make this tuple, and then I push it back to my vector of tuples. So once I've done this search, now I sort this vector of tuples. As we know that tuples, when you compare two tuples, they are first compared based on their first coordinate, then based on the second coordinate, then based on the third coordinate. So we can just sort this vector of tuples directly. Then I see out the count, and then I see out each tuple. And so if I input 2, then it gives me the exact output that was needed. So are there any questions?
Somil,
Yeah.
just explain the XYZ must be integer part. My network glitched at that point.
Yeah, so we have this equation, so we rearrange this to that. So firstly, we note that x is b plus c minus a by 2. So it is an integer upon 2. Similarly, y and z are also integers upon 2. So either it will be an even integer upon 2, in which case it will itself be an integer, or it will be an odd integer upon 2, in which case it will be an integer plus 0.5. So note that x and z sum up to this side length b. So if x is an integer, then z is also an integer, and if x is an odd integer upon 2, then z also has to be an odd integer upon 2. So you get that if any one of x, y, z is not an integer, but instead an odd integer upon 2, then the other two also have to be odd integers upon 2. So now suppose all three x, y, z are odd integers upon 2. Then you consider this equation. R square is an integer. This will be an odd integer upon 2. So this side will have denominator 2 in the reduced form. Denominator 2 or 1, it will be 1 if r is even. So the denominator will be less equal to 2 for this side. However, on this side, in the numerator, we have the product of 3 odd integers, and in the denominator, we have 8. So the denominator of this side in the lowest form will be 8. So these two sides cannot be equal. Therefore, we cannot have x being an odd integer upon 2. It must be an integer. So x, y, z, all of them have to be integers.
Okay, fine.